Hi, folks. Meteorologist Michael Wilhite here with Southern Indiana Weather. It is your winter forecast 2015-2016 time. Finally, all right, you've heard about El Nino. There is the El Nino circled for you in yellow, and it is probably going to be a very big factor for us. How big of a factor? Less as we go through the wintertime, but certainly at the beginning of the wintertime, it is going to be a dominating factor for us. It is the reason why we're having almost no rain right now and an above normal fall so far. That looks like it's going to hold, but eventually El Nino will weaken. Well, what about snow? That's what everybody wants to know about. El Nino snow totals. How can we predict snow whenever you got this? The past three El Nino events being 15, 20 plus inches, and then the El Ninos before that 3 inches, 7 inches, 6 inches. You see the difficulty in forecasting. The good news is El Nino is not the only dominating factor this year. It is just one of the big ones. Normally El Ninos like to strengthen as you go through the winter. That's not the case this winter. What I've got in the black box here for you is the El Nino index, and the black line, of course, is analyzed where El Nino has been in the previous months here. And you notice basically it's capping out. All the squiggly lines are different models, and the dashed line is the kind of the mean of those models. And what you can see is a downward trend is noted as you head through the wintertime. That's important. As El Nino starts to weaken, that should allow some of those other things to take place. El Nino, as I said, is not the only factor. One of the other big factors is this warm water off the Gulf of Alaska. That was a dominating factor for us the past couple of cold winters that we have had. We've also got this cooler water off the south of Greenland and Iceland there. Certainly will be a big player for us as well. Now, how do I make a forecast? Let me just talk about this. Basically, what I do is I look at analogs, and an analog is basically looking at conditions from years past that have very similar conditions to what we're seeing right now, and it'll help us predict what we could see in coming years. And so I'm going to look at the top analogs, 1957, 1958. There you can see the waters start to mash up. Certainly the El Nino waters mesh up there. Waters south of the Gulf of Alaska and even the waters near Greenland are somewhat close to what you see. That's a pretty good one. There, 1982-83 is another one. 86-87, a pretty decent one there as well. 91-92, another reasonable one as well. Basically what I've done is taken these four El Nino analog years, and I've combined them and I've weighted them, giving 57, 58 the top priority, the next priority 86, 87, and then 82, 83, 91, 92 of the lower priority. Meshing these together, we can come up with an analog and give us an idea of what could happen this winter. Overall, warmer in the north, cooler in the south. We kind of figured that's what was going to happen. That's oftentimes what an El Nino does. But let's break it down and get a little bit more specific in month. December, starting out very warm from the way the analogs look right now. By the time you get into January, starting to cool things down. In February, that cool weather starts to expand a little bit, lasting even into March. If this analog is right, a slow start to spring. So looking at the overall picture, maybe not as helpful as the individual months there. But is there any of our computer models that we can have that will mesh up fairly well with what we see in the analogs? Well, actually, yes, there is. I'm not going to bore you with dozens of computer models, but I do want to show you the JMA. The JMA has been by far the most accurate the past several years. It's actually meshing up fairly nicely with my analogs, with the exception of one member there. This is for June, July, August, September, and October, the different model runs over the past 5 months that we've got here. And you can see 4 out of 5 showing pretty much the very same thing there. And a little bit of a variance is there on where the cool is versus the warm, but overall not too bad. Looks very similar to my analog. So that's one of the things that I look at. Siberian snow cover extent is another big thing that I look at too. How much snow cover do we have build up in Siberia during the month of October? Has a big effect on our winter weather as we go later on into the winter. Here's where we looked on September the 30th. Here's where we're at now, a pretty rapid buildup. The models predict for us, though, that by the time we end October, we're going to have a very massive amount of snow there built up. And, of course, that matters because here's a little chart. I won't read everything on here, but basically as that snow cover expands, it strengthens the Siberian high. The jet stream then starts to amplify. That heats up the polar vortex. The polar vortex get displaced, and negative Arctic oscillation conditions can happen. What does that basically mean? The polar vortex warms because of all that snow buildup in Siberia, and as it warms, it gets displaced more and towards Hudson Bay, as you can see. That allows cold air to start to spill over. And by the way, we can get cross-polar flow going on with that, and basically all that cold air from Siberia, because the polar vortex is displaced, can cross over the North Pole, go down into Canada, and come right into us with a negative Arctic oscillation. It's sort of like Canada has sprung a leak. This is the bitterly cold temperatures that we saw. Remember the polar vortex in the news of the past couple of years, so I won't have to go into that, I don't think, too extensively, but whenever we have extreme amounts of snow during the month of October build up, it can lead to that later in the year. That's exactly what we're seeing, so that is a very cold signal that we will watch out for. And again, the El Nino may hamper that at the beginning of the year, but remember, El Nino is on a downward trend, so the later that we go, the less of an effect El Nino should end up have on us. So let's go ahead and take a look then at your forecast on the national picture. Here's some highlights. Warm in the west, cool in the south. Below average snow there in the orange, cool and wet down there towards the south. Looks like the East Coast gets another decent sized year for above average snow and cold. Will Boston get those record breaking snows? Probably not. That's a once in 100 year kind of a thing for them. I mean, that was just massive amounts of snow. But certainly I think they get above normal snow the way things look. But in the Midwest, zones 2 and 3, definitely wild temperature swings and sort of winter's battleground for us. Basically what that means, wild temperature swings won't be uncommon for some days to be highs in the 20s. The next days followed might be in the 40s or 50s. In fact, I've seen that going back through the historical data on El Nino years. It's not uncommon. So let's kind of break it down to what we can expect then. There's some averages for what we can expect. Snow totals 11.9 inches here at the weather office, 10.6 in Evansville. You can see basically from 10 to 12, 13 inches across the area. What can we expect, though? Those wild temperature swings will certainly be something that we'll battle at times during the winter, maybe not all winter long, but here's the big thing. Slow start to the winter. December looks fairly warm to me at this point as El Nino holds firmly on. As we get into later in January and into February, that's when we'll get into the heart of winter. May even actually spill over into the March as we head into the spring months there as well. And that's whenever it looks like we can get the potential for some of those brutal temperatures to come in. Snow totals, again, you saw the chart earlier, folks. Snow totals run the gamut. 75% of 100% to 125% of average is probably a reasonable estimation for us as far as that is concerned. But really, that's all going to depend on when winter ends up really starting. It starts warm in December. How early in January or how late in January do we start to see the El Nino weaken enough that the other effects take place? That's going to greatly affect our snow totals. And of course, with the El Nino being firmly in place there, that's going to increase our risk of icing and wintry mix type of setups as well. Some of our bigger ice storms have happened during El Ninos. Something to keep in mind. It's not a guarantee, but it's something we will certainly watch out for. And by the way, for you snow lovers, I will just at least throw this out there. The last El Nino we had, the Super Nino there in 97, 98. Folks, it was warm all winter long here, but we did have one big snow and it dumped almost 2 feet of snow in the Louisville area. So take heart, winter lovers. Snow can still happen during El Ninos. It happened almost all in one snowfall that year, but it was a doozy of a snowfall. Will that be the same way this year? Really, there's no way to predict it this far in advance. All that we can say is a slow start to winter comes, but take heart, as by the time January and February start to roll around, that's when we should get into the start of winter. And I certainly think that there is a chance we could go above normal on snow totals, but it really just depends on exactly when winter starts. Folks, that is it for this winter forecast. If you want more details, view the blog, and of course, keep it tuned here to Southern Indiana Weather on Facebook, at Southern INWX on Twitter, and SouthernIndianaWeather.com, our website, throughout all winter long as we track all of this wintry mess for you. I'm meteorologist Michael Wilhite. That's your winter forecast for 2015-2016. Take care, folks.